Hi everyone. Now last year it was claimed that Prince Charles, through his associate Michael Fawcett, has been offering honours in return for favours, in this case major donations to Charles's charities. Now if that's the case, then he's broken the law, which is why I reported Charles and Fawcett to the police. And the revelation begs the question, how long has this been going on? How many more of Charles's friends and donors have been given honours in exchange for favours or cash? A big part of the problem here is the excessive secrecy surrounding the royal family. The British monarchy is one of the most secretive institutions in Britain. Historians have claimed it's more secretive than CIA and MI5, organisations that have good reason to keep secrets. But what reason does the Queen have, or Charles, other than to hide things that will embarrass them? So here's how royal secrecy works. Most public bodies in this country, whether at national, devolved or local level, are covered by the Freedom of Information Act. Scotland has its own FOI Act, which is broadly similar to the one that covers England and Wales. Now this act gives citizens the right to insist on access to public records, including minutes of meetings, reports, correspondence and financial records. That right is subject to certain exemptions, including national security and personal data. In other words, you or anyone, for whatever reason you please, can write to any public body and request disclosure of information. There's even a great website set up to do just that at whatdotheyknow.com. Unfortunately, if you search that site for the royal family or the monarchy, you'll get this notice telling you that the royal household is not covered by the FOI Act. Now you can still send a request, but you can see they're not exactly forthcoming with information. Now you would have thought that there is no more public a body than the monarchy, an institution that gives us a head of state and which is funded by the public to the tune of more than £345 million a year. Yet the royal household isn't covered at all by the Freedom of Information Act. The institution of monarchy is not even recognised by law, or by that law, as a public body. For communications between the royals and public bodies that are covered, there is an absolute exemption from the requirement to release documents. In other words, if a government minister exchanges letters with Prince William or Prince Charles, you're not allowed to know what those letters or emails said, or indeed whether they even exist. Now, even if no other exemptions apply, one of the parties to the correspondence being a royal will block disclosure. And you can't challenge that decision. It's an absolute exemption. Now you may think that we have no business knowing such things, but this is what the FOI Act is for. If your local police are doing something you want to know about, you can write to them and ask for internal documents, accounts and so on, as well as emails and other correspondence. Now all this is to give us some insight into what's going on in the halls of power, so we can properly scrutinise and challenge government, the police, local authorities and even your local school. But not our head of state or heirs to the throne, and this matters. Now Prince Charles is particularly notorious for writing to government ministers, not in his role as heir to the throne, but to lobby in favour of his interests and political agenda. Yet we have no idea what he's saying, who he's saying it to, or what impact that lobbying is having. Now it's being claimed that the NHS has supported homeopathic remedies far longer than it wanted to because of royal interference, and that Charles's education agenda influenced reforms in Scotland. But we can't find out because the law bars any disclosure of his lobbying. The Guardian fought for 10 years to get his letters released and then eventually won that case. But all they could get hold of were letters written within a brief window around 2006, because that's the FOI request that they took to court. And while going through that legal challenge, the government changed the law to ensure the exemption was absolute, so no further disclosures would be possible. Now this is a big problem made worse by two important factors. First, Prince Charles has access to all cabinet papers, which is more access than most cabinet members get. This means he knows what policy changes the cabinet is considering before anyone else, and therefore has a significant advantage when lobbying for his interests or agenda. This is in effect insider trading on stilts. Secondly, Charles and the Queen can cause delays and problems for the government by ignoring requests for royal consent, and can insist laws are amended to suit their interests. And any such lobbying is kept under wraps, completely beyond any public scrutiny. And this happens, as we saw in 2021 with the Queen getting exempted from Scottish environmental laws, and a much older instance where the Queen lobbied successfully in the 1970s for exemption from race discrimination laws in the workplace. But royal secrecy goes beyond their lobbying. In the UK, as in most democracies, all official documentation of any kind is eventually placed into a national archive. This allows academics, historians and the general public to learn about how the country is being governed, how major events in history were dealt with, and learn about how our constitution works in practice. It's also a matter of democratic principle that the public should be able to review how our governments work. In the UK, what was a 30-year rule has since become a 20-year rule, meaning that official documents not already released under Freedom of Information requests will be released after 20 years, unless the royals have gotten their hands on those documents first. Royal archives are kept under lock and key in Windsor. These archives contain millions of official documents, letters and so on, official correspondence going back decades, possibly centuries. Yet our current head of state has deemed all of this material to be private and personal, to be locked away in a private family archive, outside the remit of FOI or 20-year rules. Not just here in the UK either. In Australia, Professor Johnny Hocking had a 10-year fight to get access to official letters sent between the Queen and the Governor-General in 1975, letters relating to the dismissal of the Australian Prime Minister. The Queen claimed these official letters between two officers of the Australian state were private and personal. Now eventually the Australian High Court disagreed and access was granted against the wishes of the Queen. Now this isn't just a problem for historians, but it raises questions about inheritance of wealth and property, the actions of our current head of state decades ago, and it casts a fog over our understanding of how our nation is governed. The Royal Archives do allow historians and writers to access this material, but on their terms and only if they deem such people to be responsible. It's two of these historians seeking access to the Royal Archives who describe the monarchy as more secretive than MI5 or the CIA. Royal finances are also far more opaque than royalists will have you believe. For instance, any travel costs under £15,000 will not be itemised, so we can't really tell what that huge multi-million pound travel bill is for. And they refuse to disclose the total cost of royal security. And then there's royal wills. When someone dies in the UK, their will, if they've left one, is open to public inspection. That's to ensure transparency of financial transactions, taxes and so on, unless you're royal. Since the early 20th century, the royals have been granted an absolute exemption from having to publish their wills when they die. And as we've been reminded by reports that the Queen is funding Prince Andrew's legal defence with money from the Duchy of Lancaster, the royals' private finances are entirely opaque and beyond scrutiny. For private citizens that might be fair enough, but for public officials with so much opportunity to demand privileges and legal exemptions, there's a public interest in knowing about possible conflicts of interest or questionable financial investments. Now you can find out more about some of this financial secrecy by listening to our Abolish the Monarchy podcast at republic.org.uk/podcast. And it must be stressed that none of this secrecy can be justified. The age-old question, what have they got to hide, has never been more appropriate than with the royals. Secrecy is to hide embarrassing secrets, and yet it's such an ingrained habit that the royals now need secrecy to survive. The closet is likely to be so full of skeletons that to open up now would do untold damage. Yet open up is exactly what we must do. We need to bring everything out into the open and then let's see how many people want to support the monarchy. End the secrecy, end the monarchy? Bye for now.